but also if it was possibly an intruder, right? That negative biasing makes me go double check. Go double check what it is. Go turn on the light, right? Or call somebody. Go investigate. That negative biasing helps keep me and my kids alive. If I consistently say, oh, that's nothing, right? When it potentially is a threat, it doesn't do well for mankind, right? Our lifespans get shorter. So that's the reason we have a little bit of a negative bias, is to help keep you alive. And so the reason I bring that up is sometimes a negative bias isn't needed though, right? Like in the time of the IRS letter. I don't even jump to a conclusion. Why don't I actually open the letter to see what it says? I actually have a lot of patients who won't even open their mail. Can you imagine that level of anxiety and a stack on their kitchen counter? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, no, I can't handle it. I let my husband deal with it. I'm like, so he's out of town, so for a week you just, yeah. And then you keep walking by it, yeah. I'm like, so you got triggered every day? Yeah. I'm like, all right, let's talk about our coping skills, right? Because it was so horrible, they were fleeing from the mail. And their mind went to worst case scenario, right? I'm like, I remember once with an agent I joked, I was like, you never know, maybe you got some inheritance. And it actually was right. She actually did have inheritance, like I guess some relative had like passed away and like they had found her after like years and it was like a couple $100, but still I was actually right. So sometimes the positive does happen, like really well, right? Majority of the time it's neutral. Have you ever worried about something and then it solves itself? And you think, wow, I wasted a lot of time and energy worrying for nothing. We do that a lot. So I encourage you to be mindful of your resources and to think about, do I need to be worrying about this now? I often ask my patients and myself, do I need to worry about this today? Is it going to affect my day today? Is it going to, right? Is there anything I can do about it, right? And if there isn't, then I will worry about it when I need to. I'll give you an example. Doctor calls you back after getting some blood work, right? I don't know anything yet. Do I need to worry about it? The doctor hasn't told me anything. They might be telling me, oh, by the way, I just wanted to let you know that your medication is also ready for you. Really? Because for 2 days while you and I were playing phone tag, I thought I was done. You mean thanks so much. So glad to hear my Synthroid is ready for pickup. Okay. But you see how you then wasted 2 days. And so be mindful of that because you can't control your thoughts. You can't control stress, but you can control the way you react to it. A couple other things I want individuals to be mindful of. Oh, what did I just say? Sorry, guys. All right. Okay. Yes.
Is it right a question?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely welcome to. I was going to do it at the end too, but you're welcome to stop me at any time.
So I have a couple of questions. One, when it comes to the IRS letter.
Yes.
So what happens when it's an actual log? Like you open the letter.
Yeah.
It's the log. So that's the first one. The second one, when it comes to, I kind of guess that when you sometimes anticipate the worst scenario, I don't know what it's like.
Go ahead.
In my mind, it kind of preps you.
I know. Yes.
So it's true. You might open the letter and then at the end it's like, it's nothing. It just tells you that
it's an announcement. You can now do it electronically or something.
Oh,
yes.
So what, we're open for employment.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
This is a worst case scenario. When it happens, it doesn't surprise you, it doesn't shock you. In my mind, sometimes it helps me better to react. Yes, it can sometimes go stress to your point. You get like really overloaded. You hold them all the scenario how I'm going to never get my way, but when I'm there, I'm on the action. I just fit in school. I'm not I don't get the freeze.
Yes. Yes.
These are my two things.
All right. So regarding the IRS letter, let's say you are getting audited. So what?
So all the things.
12 years of grad school, and that's what they tell me. So what? So what? You get audited. Does that necessarily mean that I will be homeless until I will be starving after living with my mother? No. I love my mother, but I don't know what weekend with her. Love the handshake opener. So the reason I say that is we will address the problem as they arise. And I hear what you're saying about my plan B, C, D, right? I grew up playing chess. I know you need to think about 3 moves ahead. And I get a lot of people who tell me that too. Remember, my father's an engineer. And it's very strategic. If this happens, I'll do this and then this and this and this. A little is fine, but he's not having panic attacks and he sleeps, right? It's when it's people have plan Z and they're not sleeping that I'm a little concerned, because a little bit is fine. Okay, I'm standing there. It's an audit. I haven't done anything to be ashamed of. And if I have, I will do the documentation. It was probably human error. I will pay the fine. I will do a payment plan. We will continue to eat and have clothing and a house, right? I am not going to go to IRS jail over one missed, right? Something here, whatever it is, right? To put it back into relation. So I'll share, my husband and I have been audited. He's a public figure. We got audited because they wanted to make an example of it. It was fine. We had an accountant, he submitted all the paperwork, but it was a lot of fun, as you can imagine. And so, but we survived. My kids have not missed a single thing. And so the reason I share that with you though is, right, we've all been through those stressful scenarios where it does turn out to be something boring. You get through it. You pull out your coping skills and your tools. And oftentimes we're racing so far ahead, trying to solve, that you're actually affecting your body and it makes you less effective as a problem solver. So keep that in mind. If I am mindful and living in this moment, I am going to be in my parasympathetic nervous system. I'm breathing clearly, my blood pressure is good, my mind is sharp, I'm gonna sleep lots of nights. If I am constantly living in the future, constantly worried about the next event and the other event and then the other events, I am not going to be performing well. And I'll actually be worse at problem solving. And so a little bit's okay. And to remind yourself, you know what? If this is an audit, I will solve it. Just like I have solved every other problem that has come across my life. Your success rate of getting through problems is 100%. I feel very confident saying that about every single one of you not having met you before. Because you are here. That means you have overcome every single problem. May not have been the solution you wanted, me too, but it's worked out. Now, I'm not necessarily someone who always says to the general public, but also remind everyone here, we have an added bonus of our faith that reminds us that everything will indeed work out. The Bible states, do not be afraid, 365 times. I think that's a lovely coincidence, don't you? And so to your point, I get that question all the time. I feel like I'm more effective. Sure, you can have a plan B if you'd like, or C. But what I encourage you to do is don't run too far in the future. So remember how I gave you that timeline of I'm living in the moment and I'm too worried in the future, it can actually lead to anxiety. I also want to point out, sometimes we go too far in the past, where we start questioning and doubting our choices. Oh, I should have filled out that paperwork more carefully back in whatever it was, 2019 on my IRS form. I should have double checked. You know, I was between two jobs, I had two employers, and I know better, I messed up. Now my husband's gonna be so mad at me, right? You're just going through. Living too far in the past has a very high correlation with depression. So if you're too far in the past, you're depressed, you're too far in the future, you're anxious. But right here, today, right now, you're sitting down, you're comfortable, we have shelter, we are safe. Your body should also feel that way, with the low blood pressure, and you'll be more optimal. You're thinking, you're problem solving, your function. So those are some of the things that, you know, is often, so does that kind of answer your question? Yeah. So, but great question, because I get a lot of that too. They're like, well, no, it's good to have a plan B and C. I'm like, yeah, but people with anxiety are like, you know, I'm like, you know, there are multiple letters of the alphabet by then. And so that's why I don't want it to start affecting your function. If it's not affecting your function, then it actually wouldn't be called anxiety, right? If it's not affecting your function, because people often ask me like, well, I have a little bit of anxiety and I don't like flying. You know, is it diagnosable? I'm like, are you able to fly? Is it like an actual phobia? They're like, no, I can do it, I just don't like it. I'm like, that's not anxiety. Like true anxiety is, it has to interfere with your function. I've had people tell me that too about when they're going through sadness. They're like, oh, I'm kind of like feeling off the last few days. I'm like, no, it's not depression. They're like, but I think it is. I'm like, you have to be at least 2 weeks, has to be significant sadness. Like, there's a criteria. Like, no. I mean, why? Oh, my boyfriend broke up with me. You know? It wasn't meant to be. Right? But when it becomes really significant, it's really, that's when I start to get concerned. Right? And that's when people should do some intervention. And I think, I mean, I'll point out, a lot of industries are built on plan Bs, right? How many of us have home insurance, right? Built on plan B. No one wants to think about what happens if my house catches on fire or a pipe breaks in the wall. But just in case, I have that plan B, right? So that's okay. But am I staying up at night every time I hear something thinking, oh, a pipe is about to burst? If I'm not sleeping because I'm so worried that my house is going to randomly catch on fire, I probably should go talk to somebody. So before I go on to baggage, doesn't that sound fun? Any other questions? I also want to remind everybody, we left some notepads and there's some pens. So if you have some questions that you want to ask or submit later, you're more than welcome to. Also, if you feel comfortable doing it anonymously, that's also fine. I've done a lot of these speeches and I've always found people don't want to raise their hand when it comes to mental health topics, which I totally get. But I encourage it. I think you'll get a lot more out of it when you are a bit more engaged. Yes?
Sorry, so building on that, with how to draw the line, because sometimes you kind of slip into it, right?
Yes.
You don't know where to draw the right line, say that's it. Sometimes like C. Sometimes your mind is
Yes.
going between D and Z, right?
And your mind thinks it's helping you. Your mind is like, no, don't go to sleep. I want us to make sure we have thought of every solution. So it thinks it's helping you. As it's now 1 a.m. and you're starting to worry about, I'm not gonna get sleep, I gotta get to work and I gotta get the job, because I gotta make IRS payments, and your mind is racing. If it's affecting your function. If it's affecting your function, I worry. One of the other things too, I always recommend is journal. When I say journal, a lot of times people think of, oh, am I gonna do a Dear Diary? I haven't done that since middle school. Like, I don't do journals. It doesn't have to be long entries, right? Even bullet point journaling, right? Because if you're trying to convince yourself that you're actively problem solving, what would you do for work problems or at school? You'd list them, right? You'd write down scenarios, you'd have models, right? Model A or project B, right? You'd have those. I would encourage you to write them down. And then to allow your mind to know, I'm not going to forget it. I have written it down. I will allow my thoughts to live here in this notebook, right? And if you do electronically, that's fine too, right? And then be able to close that and physically distance yourself from it and mentally tell yourself, it's okay now. I have given myself some time to worry so it doesn't leak out during the rest of the day and during my sleep. I have given it permission to have my worry time or my problem solving time. And then I will draw the boundary and I'm going to go be present with my children or with my family or whatever it is. Have you ever gone through a stressful time and realized that you went through the day not really being present? Yeah, absolutely. I remember during actually all my licensing exams, because there were so many of them, my husband wanted to go to the movie and I'm all, why? I won't remember the movie. I won't pay attention to the plot. Internally, I'm like pop quizzing myself on like, Freudian therapy and all this other stuff, right? And medication. Because I'm not even paying attention to the movie. Even though physically I'm there and we paid the ticket, right? I am mentally not focused. That's when you realize, okay, it's starting to affect me. This isn't good, right? And so I always encourage individuals, you can control your thoughts. When do you feel like it's enough? 24 hours a day is not ideal. Set a time and set a timer. That's the other thing too. You ever notice your mind is racing and you lose track of time? You're like, oh, I spent a lot of time thinking on that, or I spent way too much time on Google, right? After that phone call from the doctor, that was nothing. Set a timer. You will lose track of time. When we're stressed, we actually do. Red lights take forever, right? But something like your lunch hour goes by in a breeze. Your perception of time gets flipped when you're stressed. So that's something else I kind of keep in mind. So I usually encourage individuals to write it down and then come to peace. Another thing is talk to a good friend, talk to a priest, talk to a therapist. Giving yourself that permission. Because sometimes when we're so focused in our own problem, I think of it as building a house from the inside. See my engineer metaphors? You're building the house from the inside. If you're building it from the inside, it's really hard to know what it's going to look like from the outside, what the weather is like. Does it fit in the neighborhood? Is it level, right? Sometimes you need a little space, a little perspective, kind of take a look at it and realize, oh, my ratio is off, right? And so that's where talking to somebody and just, even you just talking and then reflecting back what you've said, sometimes you're like, you're right. The odds of me actually going to jail over one mess up on my 2017 IRS probably is small. It's probably going to be a fine and a payment plan, and I'll never make that mistake again on my forms, right? And so putting it into perspective. Yeah. Any other questions? These are great questions. I appreciate it. So the other thing too, I want you to know the kind of thoughts you carry. We refer to it as luggage or baggage. And the truth of the matter is we all have something called core beliefs. Okay, core beliefs are what you grew up with, and oftentimes they can be quite negative. So I might be working with an adult where I start to see a theme where they might think they're unlovable, and every fear they have is, I'm going to get fired. I have my annual review. They don't like me. I'm going to get fired. I think my husband's going to break up with me and have an affair. I'm like, whoa, there's this whole theme of you being unlovable. I might find out, oh, one of their parents left when they were a child. I'm like, oh, there it is. That's where I started, right? And as a kid, it actually shapes the brain and their thoughts, and it's hard to change, right? As opposed to someone else who might be able to reflect on those thoughts, notice that thought pattern, and realize, actually, I'm a fighter and I'm a survivor. I know what it's like to be independent at a young age. I'm extremely compassionate, understanding of other people, and I'm resilient. So even if my annual review of work does not go well, I know I'll be fine and I can find another job. Same person, same stressor, just change the core belief. And so paying attention to some of the thoughts that you carry in your head, I want you to start paying attention to those. So I wrote some of the common ones that I hear, things like, I failed because I didn't get the job, or I didn't get into medical school, or I didn't get whatever it was, right? Things like, how am I going to pay the bills? A lot of financial stress. The big existential question, why me, right? Why does this have to happen to me? It always happens to me. I want to point out we're all having that thought, so maybe it's not just you. A couple other things that come up is, am I good enough? Do I deserve this, right? Sometimes we learn shame, which is a symptom of depression and anxiety, right? And we constantly feel in doubt, I'm not worthy of this, I'm not worthy of that. And we have a hard time setting limits and boundaries with people, thinking I should try to please them all the time and be a server. That's the only way I'm of value. And again, a lot of times it's something that they may have learned growing up, or a way that they've come to terms with their cognitive dissonance or discomfort of, oh, I'm important because I serve everybody else and I have no benefits to myself. Oh, that's not good. Right? And then can I continuously be better, right? For my family, can I be better for my loved ones? Can I be better at my job to make more money to pay off their college? Those sort of things. Okay. So you want to be mindful of them. And those are actually cognitive distortions. So cognitive distortions are sometimes called unhealthy thinking patterns. And they're also, I used to work with teenagers. We used to call them stinking thinking, right? It's not the healthiest thought pattern. And I want you to be aware of the different styles of cognitive distortions, because when you notice a style, I want you to stop yourself from doing it. And some of the common ones, but they're all automatic, right? They happen lightning fast. Some of the common ones are all or nothing thinking or black and white thinking. Let me give you an example. If I spill coffee on my blouse, true story, and my thought, as I'm running late for work, my thought is, great, my whole day is ruined. I just gave my cup of coffee a lot of power, right? Because I spilled some, my mind goes into, my whole day is ruined. My mood is now bad. Do you think I'm nice to my children when I come to leave for work? No, I'm short with them, right? Do you think I'm nice at work? No, right? So that's your mood. I'm actually increasing the odds that it's going to be a bad day. That's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe it, you actually increase the odds that it's going to be bad. As opposed to what I did in this case, run back upstairs, change my blouse, text my assistant, let her know I might be late for my first patient, who thankfully was also late, so she didn't even notice, and able to recover the day, right? I was grateful I didn't burn myself. Lesson learned, make sure the lid is fully on before you drink, okay? And I moved on. But that, of course, also is because I've been able to notice my all or nothing or black and white thinking. Black and white thinking is another way of saying all or nothing. I like saying that one because the world isn't black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray, right? Where that wasn't an ideal, I want to point that out. Me spilling coffee all over myself was not ideal. I wasn't like, yay, I'm excited, I'm gonna try to put a happy face and move. No, I'm not gonna lie to myself, that was really annoying. It was messy, and I had to clean up the creamer off the floor that was sticky. I think the dog got into it too. But that's okay. I was able to make it a shade of gray instead of black. I'm like, it isn't right ideal, but it isn't horrible. And I'm not gonna lie to myself either and say it's great. You know, I had a patient once tell me that they were reluctant to come into therapy because they think it's just about happy thoughts. And I try not to laugh, and I'm like, I wish it was that easy, right? That I just helped you sugarcoat the world and told you it's all happy and it's filled with glitter and unicorns and sprinkles. It's not. The world is challenging, and the world is hard, and you have obstacles. But you also have the tools and the resources and the means to get through them. And so that being said, noticing, right? Are you labeling things? Are you disqualifying the positive, right? I was upset, I spilled coffee. I should be grateful that I have more clothes to go change into, right? And that I had a dog that looked it up for me, thank you, right? Probably was high for the rest of the day, but I was at home, so that's okay, right? Am I doing mind reading? That's another popular one. Mind reading, and yes.
Was it before we take the first one, so nothing?
Yes.
So the social media said that you address it as if someone believes in something, it's gonna be.
Yeah,
what it's called.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling.
Yeah, if you believe it, you're going to increase the odds. If I walk into work thinking I'm gonna get fired, I'm probably gonna be a bad employee and increase the odds I'll get fired.
I believe that this is not only associated with teenagers. I think that it stays.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes. At Kaiser, I treated the whole general adult population, so 18 to 100 years old, and we are all capable of having that. A lot of times, thought patterns can start in childhood, right? I even notice my children doing things like a toy gets broken or they're building their Legos, something falls, and he's like, "It's ruined," and he wants to. I'm like, that's black and white thinking. No, it's fine. We're gonna fix it. See, we move on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not at all.
I think people take it to the other extreme and call it manifestations.
Yes, yes. Which is where they think, well, if I have positive manifestations, the world will be great and wonderful, right? And so that's where, and I do positive psychology, and I believe in having positive thoughts. But I'm sitting with somebody who just lost their son in a car accident. I don't sugarcoat that. I sit with them in their sadness and their grief. I help them process. I have been emotional with my patients, right? It's hard to hear some of these things, and they've gone through tough things. But I also remind them, right? They're trying to find, how do I make meaning? How do I define my life now that my child has passed away? Or how do I, right? And so then that's where we're able to kind of maybe do some little bit of work of, this is normal, this just happened last week. You're allowed to be in the grief process. But how can you, right, define your life moving forward? And try to find some meaning or have their memory live on in a positive way, things like that. You hear about a lot of parents who, when they lose a child, will start a nonprofit. They're taking all that loss and energy and trying to put it into something positive, right? So yeah, very good point, yes. Another one that I like is mind reading. I remember, I hear so many of that one where people are like, I didn't want to tell my husband I scratched the car. He's going to be so mad at me, right? How do you know that? They're like, I know him. Okay, it scratched the car. Like he's never scratched the car? Or he just never told you he scratched the car. Right? And I've had individuals where they'll, we talk about going and confronting somebody and they come back and it's so much better than I expected. He laughed it off, he didn't even notice. He thought he did it, and things like that. And I'm like, look at that. It wasn't as bad of a reaction as you anticipated, right? You hear that a lot. That one I hear a lot with teenagers because they'll tell me, I don't want to tell mom and dad. They're gonna be so mad at me. They're gonna kill me. I'm like, no, they're not. I assure you. We spent a lot of money on you, okay, as Aaron. We've invested a lot into our children. We will not, all right? We might be disappointed, as I tell my children, but I'm not going to, right? You'll be fine. I'd rather you tell me the truth than I find out later, right? Who put the slime on the carpet? Okay, so that's the mind reading or the fortune telling. Fortune telling sometimes is also called crystal ball. People trying to predict the future. If I don't get to this particular medical school, I won't be set up for a good internship that won't get me the career I want, and then I can get this, and then, right? It's this whole idea of I'm trying to predict the future. No one can do that. And if they can, I would love some lottery numbers, okay? No one's ever been able to predict the future, but our mind goes into that. This will happen, and that will happen, and this will happen, and then your body reacts as if it's actually happening. That's where I should get concerned. Like, ask yourself, it might happen, and I can be prepared for it, but you know what else might happen? Something positive might happen too. I've never had anybody worry about something good happening. True, right? No one's ever worried about something good happening. Something coming there. Oh, another one is the should statements. I should have known better. I should have filled out that taxes form so much better back in 2017. I should have made sure that lid was super tight on my coffee. I should, right? You're judging yourself, you're shaming yourself, right? You did the best you could in that moment with the information you had. And you need to give yourself some grace for that. We all make mistakes. It's part of the human experience. How am I doing on time? All right,
Okay.
all right. Yes,
So the should arguments, okay?
yes.
What if the parents
Yes.
are just telling the kids that you should have done that, you should have done that?
So I would encourage them to find a different way to phrase that.
Okay.
What I usually do is I'll ask them, like, let's say the child broke something in the house, right? Threw a ball, broke a vase, right? You should know better. You should not have thrown the ball. You're always mischievous and getting into trouble, right? We've now, right, overgeneralized. Now I've made this child a bad child because of one broken vase. And I'm saying should statements. What if I were to rephrase that, try that cognitive distortion, and try to replace it with a healthier alternative? So instead of a negative statement, I say a neutral statement, right? Habibitano, right? And we talk about, what do you think we could have done differently here? And they say, Mom, I know you've told me before, don't throw the ball in the house. And I already feel bad, right? A lot of times shame is natural sometimes, right? And so in that situation, telling I appreciate you telling me that you're the one who broke it. However, right, I need you to be extra mindful in the future, please, as opposed to you should. Because what happens is they grow up now internalizing the should statements, and that can be very negative, where they will continuously doubt, and there's actually a really high correlation with depression, right? Because they're constantly feeling like they're doing the wrong thing. And so instead, right, we're now being proactive, that problem solving that we're talking about, but in a healthy way of, can I be more mindful? I can still play with my ball, but let's find an alternative. I can play outside. I can play in this room where there is nothing breakable, right? Or I can instead play with, right, whatever it is, Legos in this room. And so you have a meaningful conversation. Also, the child will hear you because you're not judging them. The should statements too. When someone says, you know, you should have done this, you should have been aware of this, why didn't you get on the budget? You should have performed better this quarter, right? And so that's not helpful. I'm not hearing helpful criticism of next quarter, let's be mindful, let's connect every month and go over the budgets. Let's get ahead of this, and there's a great opportunity for growth. Same message, different delivery. And sometimes the message is lost on the delivery. And so that's something that I often encourage. So can I, instead of the I should have, right? I would like to. In the future, I can. That's how I would change it.
And it's creating the kids.
Oh,
Automatically that he's just recording that from time to time in every situation he encounters in his life. Is that right?
you got it.
Yeah.
A lot of
So how
time.
can you have this bit?
So
Is it even cognitive as well?
yes, so
Yes.
the good thing is it's cheap. You can change it, right? We can change our thought patterns. That's the great news. Okay, now that I've stressed you all out and everything like that, we can change this. You can change your negative thought patterns. It takes a little bit of conscious effort though, right? And I'm not here to blame mom and dads, because I think parents do the best they can with what they know how to do. And I'm never going to blame a parent and say they did a lousy job and that's why the child has panic attacks. Sometimes I find out later the mom also had panic attacks. I'm like, oh, okay, there you go, right? Probably couldn't do better because her resources were also low, right? Or this child is a particular challenging child. Sometimes they are, right? Particularly challenging. Or there's certain personality styles that rub against each other. So what I would often do is I would encourage individuals to engage in, right, some healthy coping skills, whether it be, right, some therapy, some reflection, being mindful of their thoughts, also encouraging the parents. One of the most helpful things you can do is to start naming. There's this old saying, name it to tame it. If you name your negative thought pattern, you're going to tame it. So sometimes, and my poor husband married a psychologist, so he will say black and white statements, and I'll be like, that's a black and white statement. He's like, I didn't read that right now. And I'm like, are you blaming? He's like, stop, right? He used to catastrophize. That was his negative thought pattern. We've been together 17 years. He no longer catastrophizes, right? Because I've named it. I'll be like, that's catastrophizing, right? Because I also want to be careful when he says it, are my voice listening? right? My husband is, he's high functioning, he's fine, not at anxiety level, but it's still not the most healthy. So sometimes he says a statement like, what did you do? You should know better. I'll come into the room, I'll be like, honey, that wasn't great. Let's see what we can do to be more careful in the future. Like, sometimes I take consequences, like, you're right, I shouldn't have said that. I was upset, and that's what flew off, right? Because sometimes that's what comes to us. Our automatic statements are often a reflection of our automatic cognitions. We let them run on autopilot.
Excellent. So, I'm very sorry.
Yeah, no.
So my follow-up question after that, what you advise me as a part of confession, when someone comes to me and then starts confessing, says, "I should not done this, I should not done this." So do you think what is the level that I should guide this person to go to the therapist?
That's a great question. I will tell you, research shows, and I trust your judgment too here in this situation. Research shows when it's at a moderate level and they're unable to control their thoughts. As a priest, you carry a great deal of wisdom and power essentially in our community. And the congregation listens to you with a very big ear. And if you were to advise them, be mindful of your thoughts, try not to, forgive yourself as God has forgiven us. You give them everything that you do in confession. And they come back to you again and they're really struggling with that. Then I would advise them, be like, you're really struggling. I'm going to encourage you. Connect with somebody so that you can, on a weekly basis, work on this. Because this negative thought pattern, it's not your fault. And you don't know how to correct it. And so now you're going to beat yourself up about beating yourself up. This is not healthy. And so let's get connected with someone who can really get in there and help you really challenge your negative thoughts. And I know going to therapy can be scary for a lot of individuals. What I often find is I encourage people, go at least twice. If you still don't like it, then you can give yourself a peace saying, I tried. The average person actually tries 2 therapists before finding one that they connect with, just so you know. So that's something else.
Fortunately, you have ACP right now, so it's much.
Yes, it's much easier. It's much easier. Like, and I will tell you, priests have connected with me, and I have another relative who's a psychiatrist, and will connect with us, asking us if we can recommend colleagues. Because sometimes we can't see you, right? Because you go to our church, or our moms have lunch together. And I'm like, oh, that might be awkward for you. But I have a good friend who is Christian based, and I know she's very good, and I know I can recommend you to her. Right? And so I'm happy to share some of those recommendations when they need those. So, but yeah, fantastic question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, not at all, not at all. It's tough to change our thought patterns. They are so automatic, we take them as truths. But the truth is 12 weeks of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what changes your cognitions, just 12 weeks, guys, once a week, 45 to 50-minute sessions. They did an analysis on people's brains with functional MRIs before and after. And you actually see a change in brain activity. That's pretty cool. People will sign up and spend a lot of money on gym memberships, right? And then tell me therapy's too expensive, they don't have time. Just want to point that out, right? There's a little bit of bias there. And so do invest in your health. And this is one of my favorites. Be your own best friend. This is very hard for people. Sometimes they feel like they don't deserve it. They've heard a lot of criticism growing up that they probably heard from their parents, that heard from their grandparents, that heard from their great-grandparents. It's funny, if I try to discipline my children in front of my parents, they will be like, no, what are you doing? I'm like, who are you? You would never let me get away with this. No, my mom's like handing him more chocolate. I'm like, what am I doing? And she's like, no. And I'm like, you've gotten soft in your old age. What's happened? Right? But the reason I bring that up is sometimes it's generational, right? People are doing the best they can. They didn't realize that their statements will become internally what the child starts to believe. Unless you change it, and you can. That's the great news, is that you can. And so being your own best friend is, I want you to challenge your own automatic negative thoughts. Would you say what you say to yourself in your head to your best friend? If my best friend called me and told me, I'm in front of the mailbox and I just got a letter from the IRS, I would not tell her, oh, you're going to jail, you're going to be homeless, you're going to have to, right? Have no food for your children and move back in with your mother when you come out of jail. I would never, right? And I'm sure none of you would either. But I would say that to myself, and I would try to believe it. Really, we're much better friends than we are to ourselves. And so I encourage you to kind of examine that, because sometimes it's hard, it feels really uncomfortable. You want me to give myself a pep talk? Or like try to neutralize my negative thoughts? Because deep down, I think I deserve them. No, you don't. And neither does your best friend. I know you would never say these statements out loud. Why are you saying them to yourself? Because your body's believing. And so I give an example here of, I got a speeding ticket. Now my whole day is ruined. My whole day from one speeding ticket. Now, I want to replace this with a healthier or neutral thought. I don't say a positive thought, because I think positive thoughts are really challenging. No one says, oh, speeding ticket, that was great. I made a friend at the CHP. No one's excited about that. But could I instead replace it with, this may be God's way of reminding me to drive safe. Thankfully, no one got hurt. It was only a speeding ticket. It wasn't a car accident, right? I am safe, my children are safe, and I will be able to sleep again in my bed tonight, right? Much different impact. Sure, I'm not happy about the financial component, right? But this will be a good reminder for me. And when you take a look at that, notice how it affects me a little differently. My day's probably gonna go a little better, as opposed to allowing it to ruin my whole day. So now that we've talked about stress and anxiety, and I've stressed you all out with all my examples, how do we cope, right? Don't want you to leave here leaving stressed out. I want you to take good care of yourself. Start with the basics. We all know the basics. If I asked all of you to list, if I had a board here, list all the good ways to take care of ourselves, right? All of you know the basics, right? Drink enough water, eat healthy, right? Do some exercise, avoid smoking and nicotine and too much caffeine, right? We all know the basics. How many of you do all of those on a regular basis? Few, and that's okay. Sometimes, right, our life is challenging, we're going through stuff, but I don't want you to underestimate the importance of that. This would be the equivalent of taking your car in for its routine oil changes. Most of us take better care of our cars than we do our bodies. That's really sad, really sad. So your car is replaceable. I just want to point that out, right? There's like a whole deductible and everything with the car accident. Your mental health, not so much. Health insurance doesn't work the same way. Like, you don't get a new psyche if you damage your first one. So might want to invest and take better care of it. And so having a good, healthy foundation, right? Taking good care of your body. Because if I'm getting enough sleep and I'm eating enough, I'm probably not going to be hangry, right? I'm going to have a lot more energy to problem solve effectively. I'm going to be a calmer, more present parent, right? These are important. This is your maintenance. We do encourage individuals to avoid alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine. I was just sharing with Elizabeth, I've been unfortunately increasing my caffeine intake lately because of my work demands. I know better, okay? I'm a health psychologist. I know much better. And a colleague said, oh, you must really love coffee. And I'm like, no, it's a necessity, not a like. You know, I need to switch back to tea, right? And I know that, but it was a very long week. So the reason I say that is we know better, so we do better, right? And try to replace bad habits with slightly better ones, right? It's going to be hard for someone who has coffee to stop it suddenly. Can I replace it with a healthier alternative, right? Switch to half decaf, and then to decaf, and then to green tea. It's much easier to replace a bad behavior with a better one than it is to stop a behavior. I'll repeat that, that one's really important. When I have people who want to stop a bad behavior, I help them replace it. If I have someone who wants to quit smoking, I don't tell them go sit on your hands, right? Because they'll tell me after a meal, I feel like I want something. We might replace it. Can you go get some sunflower seeds, right? Can you go eat some baby carrots? Can you go get some gum? You know, so we do those things. Those are some of the replacements aside from the patch, okay? But those are the things that we often do. We try to replace it. It's like the harm reduction model. And then you taper down until you stop the bad behavior. And so it's much easier to replace it than to stop it. Stopping suddenly is extremely challenging. We are human beings of habits and creatures of habit. And so we want to do something else and move it. And so that goes the same for, right? The nicotine and the caffeine are actually uppers. So if you're already anxious and stressed and you're feeling on edge, I am not going to add fuel to your fire. I've had people tell me, oh, I've never had issues with coffee. You know, I grew up in an Italian family. We have espresso at dinner. I'm like, yeah, but no, you have panic attacks. So we're done. We're done with espresso at dinner, right? We're going to replace it with something else. And so just because it wasn't a problem for you in the past doesn't mean it isn't now, okay? The other thing too, people ask me about alcohol. Alcohol is both an upper and a downer, right? I've had individuals tell me, well, I don't think it affects my anxiety, or I don't think it affects my sleep. Anybody here know what alcohol breaks down into in the middle of the night after you've had it? Sugar, upper. So initially it's a downer, then it's an upper. And I'm yet to meet somebody who said, wow, I slept great after drinking a whole bunch last night. It affects your sleep too, right? Not to mention, I won't go into the liver and everything else. I know everybody here knows that. But I just want to point those things out. Be mindful of what you're putting in your body. And then of course, some other things that you can do. I want you to have healthy habits. That includes exercise. Huge famous study out of Johns Hopkins was done and repeated multiple times in the last like 20 years, where they compared individuals struggling with depression and anxiety. Some of them got medication, some of them got a gym membership. And they had to go because there was a trainer. So they registered and made sure they actually attended. Who do you think did better after 3 months? They both did well. They both did well. So there is some benefit to antidepressants, so I don't want to minimize that, and that's also for anxiety. They both did well. What surprised people was that exercise was as good, and in some cases, for some populations, even better, because medication takes longer to build up, and some people have side effects. So they actually found people were more compliant with the exercise, and therefore it was more effective. And then they repeated the study. But we gave you both. They had a compound benefit. It was amazing. And so one of the most important things that came away from that was, all right, exercise is really good for your mental health. That makes sense. How much do you need? Because I don't have a lot of time, right? We're living in a very stressful society. I don't have an hour for CrossFit every day, right? What am I going to do? That's what most people think. When I tell them you have to do exercise, they're like, I have to go do Ironman? No, 20 to 30 minutes of gentle cardio. Walking your dog 3 days a week is good for you and the dog. That's it. 3 days a week. And I ask most people, can you do 3 days a week? During the week, it's so busy with work and school. Can you do Saturday and Sunday? And then just one day at lunch with a coworker. Make a commitment. At Wednesday, Sally comes to my desk. We walk around the building sometimes. Can you do that? Yeah, I think I can do that. Start small. If you want to build a healthy habit, meet where you are, your resources. I'm not going to have a sedentary person go sign up for Spartan races, okay? We might start with walking. It's a functional activity. Everybody can do it. Remember, I treat chronic pain. Some of my patients are walkers. I still make them walk. I'm that mean, okay? And they still come back, thankfully, because they find a benefit. And so if you're, telling me I can't do that, fine, do Tai Chi. Can't do that, you can do sit and be fit. There is physical activity for every level. I have worked with paraplegics and we have still been able to get them some kind of activity. It is important for you to be active. And so don't underestimate exercise. That is very, very good for you. And then of course, some other mental components, prayer. There's no doubt that prayer can be extremely helpful. And there's research that shows time and time again, independent of religion, prayer and spirituality is extremely comforting and beneficial. Individuals who have that resource do better, have more resiliency in stressful times. Also, prayer has been around for thousands of years. It is actually a form of meditation. When I talk about meditation, a lot of times at work, I get a lot of resistance. Sometimes I work with the Latino Catholic population and they're concerned. They're like, no, I'm very Catholic. Is this like anti-Catholicism? I'm like, no, you praying the rosary is actually a form of mindfulness. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. I'll pray the rosary. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I just want you to understand that. So I just want to point that out. A lot of religions actually have things like that. The reciting of certain hymns, even we do, right? Hymns and psalms. And I people tell me that brings me a great deal of comfort. And I think about it, I'm like, yeah, because when you do that, you're in that present moment we talked about. You're not in the future. You're not in the past. You're not anxious. You're not depressed. You're slowing down your heart rate and your breathing, and your mind is focused on one thing, right? That's a mindfulness activity. And if that's where you are with your meditation, I encourage you to do that. I have some individuals who have tried meditation, find it so helpful that they will often incorporate it with their prayer. So if they already have a prayer routine of every night, I might tell them after that, please do 10 minutes of deep abdominal breathing as part of your meditation and part of your bedtime and self-care. Okay. Of course, psychotherapy is extremely helpful. I know it can be hard and challenging to find a therapist. in the state of California, nationwide, we have shortages of therapists right now. Most therapists are so full, they aren't even accepting patients. However, I do encourage individuals to reach out to your mental health providers, and your insurance often covers it, okay? Actually, by law, they have to. They just don't advertise it because it's expensive. So they kind of hope you won't utilize it, okay? Remember, I used to work for Kaiser. So what I do encourage you to do is talk to your primary care doctor, even sending them a message. They'll be able to tell you, oh, contact your insurance, here's who's on your MPN. If you have Kaiser, you just call the psychiatry department, they'll do an intake for you. If you're paying out of pocket, I have some resources, including Psychology Today, where you can do a search. So if you want a particular type of therapist, a male, a female, someone who specializes in anxiety, someone who specializes in mania, eating disorders, whatever it might be, you can find that. And then lastly, we now have the ACP, reach out to that organization. A lot of us either are taking patients, although I know some of us work in hospitals or specialty clinics like myself, so we can't take the general population, but we often can recommend individuals for people, okay? The other thing too is tell your doctor, because if it is significant, when I have people who are living with regular panic attacks, I often do encourage medication, and there's no shame in that. There's SSRIs, selective serotonin inhibitors, that are very helpful for anxiety, and it isn't a synthetic hormone that we're giving you. We're actually telling your body to make and produce and use your serotonin that's naturally already in your body better, which is why it takes 4 to 8 weeks to build up in your bloodstream, because it's your body producing it. So that's kind of cool. The other thing too is when you're so anxious, you can't do some of these things. Some of these things are very challenging. And so to give yourself a bit of a crutch, right? Because if somebody breaks their foot, the doctor doesn't tell them to just hop on the other one, right? They give them the walking boot, you get a crutch until you're healthier. And then you get rid of the crutch, and then you get rid of the walking boot, and then you're fine, right? You do a little PT. So same thing. Medication can be scary. If anybody has questions on that, I'm happy to elaborate more on that. But I've seen many cases where it's helpful, especially for having panic attacks. Those are dreadful and scary. You don't have to go through those alone. I also don't want anybody to get addicted to short-acting medications. Because I've had some people tell me, well, I just take a little Xanax or Klonopin or Ativan as needed. And I've been doing that for 10 years. Over time, you get dependent on it. People do not get addicted to SSRIs. And so think about it this way. An SSRI is sunblock, and a benzo, like Xanax, would be aloe vera. I don't know about you, but I'd rather be, right, taking sunblock than putting aloe vera on a burn. So, a couple other things is socialization, extremely, extremely important. Big study in 2017, ironically right before the pandemic, that showed having adequate social support was actually a bigger predictor of your lifespan and your quality of life than even obesity. This shocked the medical community. I remember pointing that out to one of my patients, and she's like, oh, that's great, because my doctor's been bothering me about losing 15 pounds. I'm gonna remind him I have a lot of friends. I'm like, I still encourage you to be healthy, but okay. So it's really important, having a structure and a routine. If you allow your mind to wander and you're not externally stimulated, your thoughts will go from being external to internal, and they will turn on you. So be mindful of that. So having a structure and a routine, okay, this is what I do, and this is what I do my day off, and I stay busy, and then I do this, and I engage, you're gonna be a much happier individual, okay? And then, of course, engaging in relaxing hobbies and activities. I leave this vague on purpose, because what's relaxing for me may not be relaxing for somebody else. I love to bake with my children. My husband hates that, because he knows there's gonna be flour everywhere in the kitchen, right? But he actually does do CrossFit, which sounds like pain to me, and I would never go, right? So what's relaxing for one person is not relaxing for the other. So think about your own tools, right? Some people here are like, oh, you know what? I love to crochet. I love to go to the movies with my brother. I love to walk the dog, right? Find what works for you. And then last, the resources I was mentioning. So I include a couple of videos and TED Talks I think are really helpful, some tricks on how to improve positive thinking. I also talk about how negative thinking can affect your body and specifically chronic pain. Again, that's my specialty. I stick to what I know. But I do find a lot of people have, right, chronic pain. We get a lot of headaches, we get aches and backaches, especially right now, we're working remote, right? Be mindful of that. I also have an introduction of a peaceful place guided meditation. It's hard to meditate. I've had a lot of people try to start meditation and they'll tell me, well, I just sat in a quiet room all by myself for 20 minutes. That sounds dreadful, okay? Don't do that. Start with like a minute and start with maybe an app. So a couple of apps I like, Insight Timer, totally free. And they have like 80,000 tracks. So use the search engine, okay? That one's like overwhelming when you get in there. And they have different topics. So if you wanna like one for help you to sleep, one to help you with anxiety, maybe the boss has not been nice and you need one for anger, right? Pick the topic you need. Headspace is another phenomenal one. Kaiser was doing it for free. Are they still doing it for free? Yeah, okay, so it's still, which is very nice. And Calm, fantastic. Not too long ago, those only had like 2 week free and then you had to pay. So now if you have Kaiser, that's a great opportunity. And some employers, right? I've treated a lot of Apple, Google employees, things like that. A lot of times the employer, you may not know that. So go take a look at your benefits. Sometimes they are there. We're like, I don't have time when I'm at work. You don't have time not to invest in your mental health. So I encourage you to do that. And then a therapist search engine. Psychology Today is the most popular search engine. Actually, once you get licensed, they mail you something to see if you want to be like on their search engine immediately. And that can be helpful for you to kind of have a starting point. Also, call your insurance. You can ask for a list of therapists that are on your MPN, okay? Because therapy can be expensive, but a lot of things that are worth your health are expensive, right? And so I do encourage you to reach out to that. And then lastly, of course, I'm going to be a good therapist. I didn't include a crisis hotline. This is a suicide hotline. It's 1-800-273-TALK, right? Which comes out to 255. They've now replaced it with 988, which also works, but people accidentally call 911 by accident. It'll take a while before they figure out it's different. And you can even text. All right.
So if you don't mind, we need just, if you can just elaborate a little about meditation, because sometimes what hits the mind about meditation is something related to yoga, something like that. But we need to clarify that meditation is a kind of awareness. It's a kind of just living the moment as it mentions, and not worrying about tomorrow, and not just getting sorry about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're going to break out into 2 workshops. In the second workshop, I'm going to do a little mindful breathing exercise before we start that one, but I'm happy to elaborate. Mindfulness is actually been around for thousands of years, okay? But Jon Kabat-Zinn came along and turned the coin. So that's why he gets the credit. And I have a couple of books up here if anybody wants to take a look. Some are anxiety, some are meditation. And Jon Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as the conscious awareness of the present moment without judgment. That sounds pretty easy. Have you tried it? Really hard to do. When you try to meditate and just sit in the moment without letting your mind race, oftentimes what it wants to do is race. And so I find for a lot of people starting with meditation, having something neutral to focus on is helpful. That's where the breath comes in handy. We have you count your breath, because your breath is usually not a trigger for people. And it's always with you, and it's very convenient. It doesn't require refills, and it doesn't have any negative side effects, okay? And your breath is in the present moment. It's not in the future, it's not in the past. And if you remember, the fastest way to activate your parasympathetic nervous system is with your breath. And so in meditation, independent of religion, and actually mindfulness by itself has nothing to do with Buddhism. A lot of times people think, oh, it has to do with Buddhism or Taoism. No, there are a lot of famous Buddhists and Taoists and things like that have done a lot of research in it. But even the Coptic Church, right, encourages us to be still and to be quiet and to be mindful. We just didn't coin the term. We didn't get credit. That's the only reason, okay? But the reason I point that out is it is something that is so important. Our mind is constantly racing. And if you don't train it to slow down, it will continue to work against you. And a racing mind, again, will often jump to the future where it's anxious, or to the past where it's depressed. And oftentimes it will do both. It will jump back and forth all day long, completely bypassing the current moment, which is actually a neutral, lovely place to be. And most people have a hard time being there. And if you are concerned about, am I having a hard time, being mindful? Ask yourself, where does your mind go when you're washing your hair? Where does your mind go when you're driving home? Where does your mind go when you're cooking the same meal you cooked before? Those are mindless tasks, they're automatic tasks, right? You're brushing your teeth. None of us consciously think about brushing our teeth, right? So pay attention to where your mind is going. That a lot of times will be that pattern, you can notice that pattern. When I shared that with my patients, I've been like, you're right, I notice every time I shower and I'm washing my hair, I find myself thinking about my mother-in-law coming to visit and I'm dreading it. I'm like, all right, she's not coming for a month. All right, and how long were you in the shower? Like, let's have some talks about that. And so the reason I point that out is a good way to start mindfulness. One of my tricks is start very small. One of my favorite ways of incorporating it daily into your routine, and this was even before 2020, was when you wash your hands. Most of us wash our hands a handful of times a day, right? And when you're washing your hands, you're holding still for 20 seconds. I want you for 20 seconds to notice the temperature of the water. I want you to smell the soap. I want you to notice how it feels on your skin without negative judgment. I don't just say, ooh, this soap smells yucky. No, that's a judgment. Just notice it. Start training your mind. You do that 5 times a day, you're trying to teach yourself to be mindful and present. And over time, you start to teach your brain it doesn't need to race all day. You can slow down a little bit. You start creating new neural pathways. So that's one of my favorite tricks. And everybody washes their hands. It doesn't take extra time. All right. Do we want to take a break and then come back for questions? Because I know I went a little long.
We're going to take a break.
Okay.
So thank you, Sarah, so
Yeah.
much. I enjoyed this whole first meeting. I'm sure you all did. If you have any questions, there are some papers that you can write it down, or if you want to speak to Sarah, who's also here, go speak to Alina as well. We're gonna take a 15 minutes break. Yeah, okay, and then we have 2 workshops. It's gonna be more interactive, more practical for us to learn some cooking skills. There are also no snacks here. Help yourself. And then we're gonna
There's some
resume
caffeine. You need to excuse the service, there's some caffeine here.
Okay. All right, and then we're gonna resume here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
This is